They would be bringing the booze in the middle of the day.
Any kind of boat that could smuggle from the Bahamas was being used.
People were so desperate for funds, they were willing to break the law.
This was a cat and mouse game between the Coast Guard and the rum runners.
There were shootouts on the river and in the bay.
The rum runners were the heroes and the feds were the bad guys.
The word was out. Young Hanley was a rum runner.
It was not an all-male profession.
There were people that were making stills out in the western part of Broward County.
We had federal police here, state police here, local police, and none were ever able to stop this thing.
Lots of people made their living that way.
If you had money, you could go to a speakeasy.
The idea that Capone would be in Fort Lauderdale was a frightening possibility.
You get an awful lot of bribery and an awful lot of corruption.
Everybody, in a sense, became a rum runner or a bootlegger.
Many people do think of Prohibition as starting in 1920, but in fact, there was a lot of work that was done prior to 1920. In fact, in Florida, most of Florida was dry long before we had national prohibition.
When Julia Tuttle and Henry Flagler and Mary Brickell together founded Miami, there were restrictions in land deeds to manufacturing, selling alcoholic beverages, with one exception. Flagler's Royal Palm Hotel was a place you could get a drink. So from the beginning, there was this prohibition against drink because both Mary Brickell and Julia Tuttle were really tightly tied to their religion, which in many ways looked down on drinking. Flagler was just a businessman, and he said, look, I don't want any competition. By 1900, you begin to see saloons opening up, and there were test cases in court, and those restrictions were thrown out. The Miami of yesteryear, the early Miami, even pre-national prohibition, was a place where you had a one-stop shop. That is, you could go into a bordello, get booze, have sexual encounter with a woman, and gamble if you wanted to.
It's no surprise that South Florida was a prime target of the pro-prohibition forces. It would be like the anti-gambling people descending on Vegas. South Florida was the Sodom and Gomorrah of alcohol.
The pro-prohibition forces are known as the Dries. There are really three groups. The first group is the Women Christians Temperance Union, the second group is the Prohibition Party, and then later the Anti-Saloon League. And the Anti-Saloon League is really the force that gets the 18th Amendment passed. But early on, the Women's Christian Temperance Union is a movement by women to try to improve the lives of women. Their main goal was to get women to vote, and therefore they have a lot to do with the suffragists. But they also want prohibition because they believe that if there's prohibition, husbands will stop drinking, they'll stop beating their wives, and they'll come home with their paycheck, which at the moment they're spending in the saloon on their way home.
And the Temperance Union would go to the saloons and hold vigils outside their establishments and pray and hope that they would close. And in actuality, 25,000 of them did because of their influence.
In downtown Fort Lauderdale, the Women's Christian Temperance Union met every Saturday morning, and they brought in all the school children that they could get to come. It was sort of like a daycare center because mothers could drop their kids off there at 8:30 in the morning and pick them up at 1. And during that time, they taught them the evils of drink and they let them draw pictures. They learned Bible verses, all of these things, and they had contests. People would write little stories, and then they were judged, and you got first place, second place, third place. I do believe that I myself won third place one time.